Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now this week we've got a couple of small bits of news, one rather large, potentially very exciting piece of news, and then we are going to finally have our look at Furious Fist with Hindsight. For those that are new to the podcast, or have just forgotten, or just want a refresher, I tend to look at each set twice in detail. The first time is when it's spoiled in Japan, we got the Japanese spoilers, and I give you my first take on all of the particular cards that have been released in Japan and will be released over here. I give you my honest opinion, and I miss a few cards, like the Den I didn't see the potential in first time round, although I still don't, truth be told. And I overhype cards compared to some people who underhype them, but it's my honest opinion. Now I'm going to have a second look, and my second look is where I look at the opinions of other people, what I've read on Facebook and various internet websites, and also just my thoughts, but a couple months down the line, after I've really had a good think about them. I'm not going to have my interview with Andrew Estrada this week, but I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to conduct that interview at the beginning of next week and have it on next week's podcast, so keep yourself posted. I've been in touch with a chap. He has said he's happy to give an interview for the podcast, so that shouldn't be a problem. It's just been the last week of summer and actually trying to match up timetables that's been a problem. Now, before we get started, I would like to, as always, pop you over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/PTCGRadio, or just search PTCG Radio on YouTube. You'll find it nice and easily. What I've been doing on there, I've been testing a Seismitoad deck with Mewtwo and Garbodor. Now, I'm going to talk about Seismitoad a lot as we go through here, but I've put up a bunch of games. There's one against Yveltal, Garbodor, there's a couple against Fighting, there's one against Pyroar, there's one against Aromatisse. So pop yourself onto my YouTube channel, have a look at that if you haven't already. There are games coming. There's a really nice game against Donphan Trevenant in the Battle of the Trainer Locks, and due to popular demand, hopefully some point at the beginning of next week there will be a deck breakdown of my Seismitoad deck going up there, so you can all see how I made the decisions about that particular deck, what card choices I've made and why, and all of that good stuff. So, exciting times, I think we can all agree. Anyway, let's have a look at the news for this week. Now, there's been a few pieces of product which have been announced, nothing terribly exciting. There is a Battle Arena deck, Xerneas versus Yveltal. We're going to be getting promos of Xerneas and Yveltal, both of which suck. They were the ones which I told you about when they came out. They were released for Movie 17 in Japan. They're not very good. It's going to come with 2 60-card decks, 20 foil cards, 2 metallic coins, and a 2-pair playmat and rule sheet. A couple of deck boxes, although it's likely to be the little cardboard deck boxes, which won't actually fit your cards with sleeves, i.e. you'll never use them, and a quick play guide. And that's coming out on October the 22nd. More excitingly, but also kind of we haven't seen these Battle Arena decks. Well, they're kind of like the trainer packs, to be honest, like when X and Y came out, we had the Excadrill versus Zoroark one. And more recently, I think Sylveon against Noivern, or something like that. But in an event that we really should have seen coming, there is the Elite Trainer Box. Now, we've seen these every set from X and Y onwards, and it's here again, Phantom Forces, and you should know where it's coming by now. It's obviously based around Mega Gengar, because he is the poster Pokemon for this particular set, and it's going to retail for somewhere around, I'm not entirely sure, I haven't got the price in front of me, they're usually about 35 quid in the UK. And you'll get 8 packs of boosters, 65 sleeves, 45 energy cards, a player's guide, 6 damage counter dice, a coin flip dice, and 2 acrylic condition markers. I suppose the really cool thing about this is that the dice tend to have some kind of symbol on them for that particular set, which is kind of cool. And obviously the sleeves will be Mega Gengar sleeves. Not the best sleeves around, not as good as the Japanese sleeves, but gosh darn it, they're coming out, so what can you do? There's also going to be a collector's album released for $5, which is nothing particularly exciting considering what we've seen before. Now, in terms of the theme decks, they have been announced. There are 2 theme decks, as always. There is Phantom Forces, which is based around Galvantula, and excuse me, no it's not. It is called, I don't actually have the names here, give me 1 second. No, unfortunately the names have not been released, but we can tell you that one features Galvantula and the other features Talonflame. As always, when the set lists are spoiled for those particular decks, I will let you know about them and what's in them and all of that good stuff. And finally, the free blister pack, where you get the free blister packs and the promo. There is a Shiftry. It kind of sucks. Sorry about that. It just does. Now, there's one more product which looks very interesting, and this is the Pokémon TCG Treasure Tin, which is going to be released in November. Now, for those of you that haven't been following Pokémon all that closely, we're getting our new set in November, as one would expect. That's Phantom Forces. And then we are getting another new set in February. That's the way it works. We get one in February, one in May, one in August, and one in November. Every year, pretty much. So, we are not having anything to do with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. They are the new 3DS games, remakes of Ruby and Sapphire, which are coming out for the Nintendo 3DS in November. So it seems a little bit silly that we would have a non-Ruby and Sapphire focus set when the games were coming out. Now, I think at this stage, it's fairly safe to assume that our February set, which bearing in mind will be released in Japan a few months earlier, i.e. to coincide near enough with the games in Japan, will be focused around Ruby and Sapphire. Now, we're not getting a set, but we are getting this treasure tin. And what you're going to have is 5 booster packs, Holo, Trico, Torchic, and Mudkip preview cards. Now, the reason those 3, of course, they were the starters in Ruby and Sapphire. And if you have a look through the previous sets, what you tend to find is that the design of the cards changes a little bit. For instance, when the X and Y cards started, the Holos went from the Galaxy Holos to the Stripey Holos. And if you have a look back through the cards, the X and Y cards look different to the Heart Gold Soul Silver cards, and they look different to the Diamond and Pearl cards, etc, etc. So I'm interested to see these promos, not because they'll be any good, they're free basics and we're not getting the stage 2s, but when they are spoiled, it's going to be very interesting to see what the new style of cards are going to look like. So as well as these promo cards and 5 booster packs, we're going to get a coin, 2 sticker sheets, featuring Primal Kyogre and Primal Groudon, a mini-album, a Pokemon notepad, 4 pencils with unique designs. Kind of a weird set because you get the booster packs and what looks like a pretty awesome metal tin, but then you get pencils and a notepad. But, I mean, go over to pokebeach.com if you want to see a picture of the tin. It is beautiful. Half Kyogre, half Groudon, as you would expect. To be honest, the most interesting part for me of this particular thing is that it's going to preview what the cards are going to look like, and when you're as sad and nerdy as into the Pokemon card game as I am, and if you're listening to this, there's a very decent chance you are like that, it's going to be very interesting to see what these cards look like. For the record, that was not an insult. If you are that kind of person, you're my kind of person, and I would probably love you if I met you. Speaking of which, Worlds next year, it's on. I'll get a chance to meet you, and hopefully love some of you, in a purely platonic way, otherwise my girlfriend would not be happy. Now, the last piece of news this week is not to do with the Pokemon trading card game, but every so often I chuck in non-TCG news where it looks particularly exciting. There is a video game being released called Pokken Tournament, and if you're thinking the word Pokken sounds like a cross between Pokemon and Tekken, the long-established fighting franchise from Namco, you would be correct. It is. It's an arcade game which is being released in Japan. There's no word whether it's going to be released elsewhere, but it's a one-on-one fighting game in the style of Tekken, and I'm assuming you all know what that means, but if you don't, Google Tekken, T-E-K-K-E-N, and you'll see what we're talking about. The characters we can see at the moment seem to be Blaziken, Machamp, and Lucario, and not to completely big up this website too much, but again, if you go to pokebeach.com, you can see a video of the game in action. It looks beautiful. What's interesting is that the trailer, and this is why I mentioned the website again, the trailer on this particular website has English writing on. At the end, you can see in English characters, planned for arcade release in Japan in 2015, which is very strange, given that it's not due for release outside of Japan. Now, interestingly enough, the arcade scene, although it thrived around about the 90s, the arcade scene is pretty much dying around the world, except for in Japan, where it's still thriving. So from a business point of view, it would make sense really to only release a game like this in Japan, where the arcade scene still generates a fair amount of money. But why put a video with English writing if it's only going to be released in Japan? My guess is it gets ported onto consoles like the Xbox One and the PS4 after a run in the Japanese arcades. I could be wrong, but most games, I mean, certainly historically, they'd start in the arcade and be ported over. That's what's likely to happen again. I'm just guessing, but that seems like it. Now, it's been a fairly mammoth news section this week, but I'm afraid we're not quite done yet, and I have saved the best till last. A new card from Spirit Link Phantom Forces, has been revealed. I told you last week or the week before, I forget exactly, that we were going to be getting Spirit Link cards. And the Gengar Spirit Link has been revealed, and the name is Gengar Spirit Link. Now, this is very, very important, because calling it Gengar Spirit Link at least hints very strongly that there will be other Spirit Links. Manectric Spirit Link, for instance, as the other Mega EX in that set. But maybe going forward into other sets with Mega EXs, maybe even going back and printing Spirit Links for old cards. Now, that's not usually something that happens, but it could be the first time for everything. Usually, if cards are released for specific Pokémon, they're in the same set. Think Victory Piece for Victini EX, or Crystal Wall and Crystal Shard for Black and White Kyurem EX, respectively, a few sets back. Now, I don't believe they'll go back and retrospectively release Spirit Link cards. I could be wrong. But because they've called it Gengar Spirit Link, I am fully expecting a Manectric Spirit Link card in this set, and probably for all of the Mega EXs going forward. Very simply, it's a tool, you attach it to Gengar EX, and if you evolve it into Mega Gengar EX, it doesn't end your turn. The card reads, when the Pokemon this card is attached to evolves into Mega Gengar EX, your turn doesn't end. Now, the wording there... Now, to be fair, it is a translation. We don't have the English wording, but if you look at the card, it's clearly specifically for one Mega EX, and actually, if you look at the characters in the wording and in this title, you can tell that it says Mega Gengar EX, and it's got Gengar on the card. And it allows you to Mega EX it without losing your turn. Now, we were expecting something along these lines. There was persistent rumours of a stadium that would allow this for both players. Pokemon have gone down the Spirit Link route, and I like this. A couple of reasons. Now, interestingly enough, Tool Scrapper has been rotated, and I said at the time the only thing we really lose is those rare situations where you may wish to discard one of your own tools. This would be one. Because if you're using Mega Gengar EX, you're probably going to want a Hard Charm on there, or more likely, a Float Stone, or more likely again, a Muscle Band. They're the kind of cards you're going to want on Mega Gengar EX, and putting Gengar Spirit Link onto Gengar EX means that you're not going to be able to then attach another tool. Now, I believe Masquerain, the Stage 1, will allow you, that's the one that everyone played in Tool Drop, will allow you to rearrange the tools on your field, but are you really going to play a 1-1 or a 2-2 or a 2-1 Masquerain line just so you can put Spirit Link on Mega Gengar, or Gengar into Mega Gengar, and then take it off to put a Muscle Band on? Now, I've seen a lot of people suggesting that, and I think that's utterly rubbish. Adding in 4 cards just to do an extra 20 damage. Play some more lasers or something along those lines. But it is interesting. Pokemon have basically realised, or maybe they knew all along, that the Megas were never played. I've suggested to you numerous times on this podcast that the Mega EXs aren't that good, and the fact that you have to end your turn to evolve into a Mega EX basically makes them unplayable. Having these Spirit Link cards, on the one hand, means you don't have to end your turn, making them more playable, but on the other hand, it's not just you can instantly play it. There's a bit of work involved. You've got to get the tool card, and then you've actually got to give up your opportunity to add another tool on there. It's very, very interesting, shall we say. So, that's Spirit Link. So, I suppose we should go back and have a look, because when I told you about these cards, I told you very clearly. I really liked Gengar EX as a hit-and-run attacker. Mega Gengar EX I didn't really like. With this, however, I can see him as a tech. Now, Mega Gengar for I believe it was 2 Psychic and a Colourless, or it might have been a Psychic double Colourless, let me check, allows you to copy an attack from your opponent's field. Now, we've seen cards like this before, Mew EX can do it, etc. Same can Zoroark with the active, but one thing that's important here is that he copies any Pokemon without needing the specific energy, which makes him a whole lot more playable. If you've got your 2 Psychic and a Colourless on there, then you can immediately, and I lied to you, it's a Psychic double Colourless, my apologies. If you've got your Psychic double Colourless on there, you can copy any attack. You can do Landorus EX's Land Judgment, etc. Which is pretty darn cool. So I can see this as a nice tech. I still prefer Gengar EX as a hit-and-run attacker, but now against a Pyroar deck, or just whenever your opponent's got something out in the field, you can drop Mega Gengar EX without losing your turn. He's got the same energy requirements as Gengar EX, and remember that the Stadium will bring that down to Psychic Colourless. You've got the same energy requirement, meaning that as soon as you evolve it, assuming you've got energy on there, you're going to be able to attack. One little side note here, or 2 little side notes. First of all, I want to remind you that one of the reasons I wasn't a huge fan of Mega Gengar EX is because it's in my opponent's hands. Now, I've told you far too many times about my adventures at the ECC this past year, and I played Zoroark. And I don't believe I attacked with Zoroark once. Now, bearing in mind, I think there were 15 best-of-3 contests that I played, and I didn't attack with Zoroark once. And a large part of the reason was, as I got high up, and I did get higher up the tables as the tournament went on, sorry for the boast, I was playing against good players. They see Zoroark, they play around it. Same thing with this. People aren't going to want to drop Pokemon that have really good expensive attacks against you. They'll fight with something like Mewtwo rather than, say, a Lucario EX, where you could use that 3rd attack to do a bunch of damage. The other thing is, remember that you can't instantly do everything. So, for instance, let's take 2 examples. Reshiram's Blue Flare. Now, Reshiram is a card that I'm a big fan of at the moment, especially in Seismitoad decks, because it's good against Rizzy and Genesect. Now, Reshiram's attack does 120, and then you discard 2 fire energy. Well, if you're using Mega Gengar EX, you do the 120, there's no fire energy, you don't discard, you win. But for something like Landorus, you can discard the fighting energy, and if you discard the fighting energy, you do the extra 80. If you don't, you don't. So if Mega Gengar EX were to copy Landorus, you would only do 70 damage. However, if you attached a single fighting to Mega Gengar EX and discarded that, you could do the extra damage, and that's what I would do with Zoroark. I would put, say, a double Colourless on Zoroark, and then I'd put a fighting on, discard that 1 fighting to do 150 to Landorus, because you can't do the extra damage unless you discard the fighting. Remember, of course, if it says something like, I believe Lugia EX reads, if you can't discard a Plasma, this attack does nothing. So there you have to discard the Plasma. If it just says, discard this energy, and you can't, well, you've already done the attack, so it doesn't matter. Kind of complicated rule stuff, but there we go. So, a fairly monster news segment this week. As always, if I've missed anything, or you want to argue with anything, or add to anything, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or tweet me at the Wassy. Now I'm going to go through my look at Furious Fist with Hindsight, and I'm going to keep it as brief as I can. There's a lot of filler in this set, as there is for everything. I looked at all the cards first time round, so go back a few podcasts, and you should be able to find fairly easily my look at all the cards in the set. What I'm going to do now is look through any cards which I overlooked the first time, or oversold or undersold, and just the best cards in the set as a whole. So looking through grass, there is Victory Bell. Now, Victory Bell basically allows you to discard a grass energy attached to it, leaving your opponent's active Pokemon confused and poisoned. It's a stage 2. It basically takes your energy attachment. Potentially it could be a tech in a grass deck, but the problem is the only good grass deck at the moment involves Rizzian and Genesect. It's Virizion and Genesect. And if you're playing a grass deck other than that, my first question would be, why are you playing a grass deck other than that? Why you would use Victory Bell, I'm not entirely sure. It could be a fun little tech against something like Seismitoad. Trainer Lock with Trevenant and Seismitoad is going to become bigger this season. So using something like Victory Bell to poison and confuse them from on your bench, forcing them to either switch or retreat or just start taking on extra damage, could be a nice little counter to something like Seismitoad or Trevenant or something like that. But the fact of the matter is, it's not. Although actually, to be fair, Trevenant's probably going to have free retreat, so it's just going to take a bit of poison damage. It's got a little bit of potential, but it's not great. Heracross EX, I'm going to say the same thing I said about Heracross EX first time round. It's not particularly good. It's not as good an attacker as Genesect EX. It's got the same weakness, it's got the same HP, but it can't do 200 damage and go through everything. Nor does it have the fantastic Red Signal ability. Mega Heracross EX, it can one-hit pretty much it can one-hit anything but a Mega for free energy. And that's pretty cool. The problem is, as soon as he starts taking any damage, he stops his one-hit ability. If it was 180 for free energy, that would be amazing. But it's 180 minus the amount of damage you've got on you for free energy. You do 60 damage to him, he's doing 120, all of a sudden he becomes rubbish. And you've got to lose a turn to evolve him up. Sorry, Mega Heracross. Leafeon, and I'm just going straight through in card order at this stage. Leafeon, I like the first attack, 30 and sleep for 1 grass. Don't forget, of course, that Eevee here, and I believe it can use its ability turn 1. You attach a grass energy, it turns into Leafeon. Honestly, ladies and gentlemen, I'd use the other Leafeon. I'd use a Leafeon that's got Energy Press, or whatever it's called, which allows you to do 20 damage times the amount of all of the opponent's energy on the field. Because against a Seismitoad, that's going to do a minimum of 80. Whereas this Leafeon's going to do 60 plus sleep. Could be fun, I just don't buy it all that much. Now, Magmortar works with Electivire. So I'm going to go through this properly when we get to Electivire. Oh no, sorry, we'll go through it now because the Magmortar's got a good attack. Magmortar's got an attack for 4 energy that does 160 if you've got an Electivire on the bench. Now, don't get me wrong, then you put a Muscle Band on, it gets to 180. That one hits EXs. Regardless of all of that, Virizion Genesect is going to be big this year. It's going to be a fantastic deck for the foreseeable future. You could even do 30 damage, 60 to a Grass Weak Pokemon, and attach a Fire Energy from your deck to Magmortar, meaning you could have him going turn 3. But truth be told, ladies and gentlemen, it's just... I like the energy acceleration, but putting 4 energy on 120 HP Pokemon is asking for trouble. If you can keep Magmortar alive for a few turns, by all means. The other alternative, of course, is to play it with Emboar. Emboar's not been rotated out. But Magmortar's a stage 1, Electivire's a stage 1, and Emboar's a stage 2. Do you really want to have to get 2 different stage 1s and a stage 2 out in order to do your attacking? It's going to be a fun deck, and sooner or later this season, somebody is going to make a funky little deck using it. But honestly, I don't think it's going to be that good. Blaziken, stage 2 fire, 50 damage and blocks retreat for 2 energy. It's not good enough. There are better Pokemon around. And that brings me to Poliwrath / Politoad. Now, if you look down the... Actually, let's start with Politoad. Let's start with him. Ignore all colourless energy in the attack cost of each of your Poliwag, Poliwhirl and Poliwrath. It's an ability. Now, you've got to get the Stage 2 Politoad out. The advantage here is it evolves from the same Stage 1 and Basic as Poliwrath. So let's ignore the colourless attacks then. Assuming we've got a Politoad out, Poliwrath does 60 and 30 to the bench for no energy, or 130 for 2 energy. That's pretty good. Poliwhirl does 20 for 1 energy, or 50 for no energy. If there's any damage counters on it already, the attack does 50 more. Think about pairing this with something like the Crobat Golbat cards, which are coming out in Phantom Forces. You could put 1 damage counter on there from your Crobat or Golbat, whichever one it is, Golbat, and then you're doing 110 for no energy. It could be quite nice. Even Poliwag is able to do 10 for 1 energy, or 20 in Confusion for no energy. You could run a fun little energy-less deck, but you're basically running 4 basics. You could run it with some outrage Pokemon, etc. But if your opponent gets out of Garbodor and you can't find a Megaphone, all of a sudden you're pretty screwed. It's not terrible, but it's not great. It's going to be, again, a fun League deck. Looking at Glaceon, it's got a terrible second attack, but its first attack 30 plus 10 to each of your opponent's bench for 1 water energy. And remember, of course, if you attach a water energy to Eevee, it will evolve into Glaceon. It's not great. Seismitoad. It's amazing. Now go on. I'm going to say a little bit about Seismitoad now, but go on my YouTube channel, watch my videos with Seismitoad. I'm going to explain far more in half a dozen games with it. And as a side note, I'm not necessarily a fan of I've made a deck, here's one game showing it. I want my YouTube channel to be a little bit different and a little bit better, so I try and show it against all the decks. Because what I want to be able to do is explain the deck in a lot of detail, and I'm not going to do that in one game. So over the course of the next kind of week or so, there's going to be half a dozen games up with Seismitoad, and if you watch them, you'll get a real sense of the card as a whole. Its second attack, not to be sniffed at, 130 for free energy. It does 30 to 2 of your bench, which kind of sucks, but I don't know, run Reshiram. But better than that, what Seismitoad does is Quaking Punch. Oh, by the way, if you add a Muscle Band Laser Verbank, that goes to 180, which is much better. Quaking Punch does 30 damage for a DCE and blocks trainers. Muscle Band Laser Bank goes up to 80, that's pretty much the maximum. You could run it with Rock Guard, don't run it with Rock Guard. It's going to be really good for like 5 minutes until your Seismitoad dies, and then you're kind of screwed, because you're doing 30 damage per turn. So your opponent can afford to sit there for a little while, build up something on the bench, come and kill your Seismitoad, take the 60 damage, your ace spec is gone. Play computer search, it allows you to search for your DCE. Quaking Punch does 30, stops your opponent playing item cards. What I really want to say about this is, I love it because the first time I played it, I couldn't win a game. Could not win a game for love nor money. And then I changed my list, and then I started playing better. I'm on a win streak of about 10 with this deck at the moment. And I'm only playing 1 or 2 games a day due to time constraints. I am winning with this deck, and the reason I'm winning is because I'm getting better. There is a very delicate balance with Seismitoad. You've got to decide, when do I want to sit here, build up my bench, and just do 30 or 50 damage, maybe with lasers adding up a bit more? And when do I want to go full on? Maybe use Grenade Hammer if I'm using water energy, maybe retreat for a Mewtwo and attack, maybe retreat for a Lucario and attack, depending on what you're playing. And the question is, I don't know, you've got to learn. To be honest, you need to kind of get a feel for it, and you need to make a good decision. If you stop too early, your opponent has trainers and comes back and wins the game. If you stop too late, your opponent can set up under trainer lock with enough time, and as soon as they build up attackers, you may well end up losing. So it's a delicate balance. I love the card, it's balanced, it's got a weakness to a really strong deck in Virizion Genesect, and it takes a bunch of skill to play. The more I see Seismitoad, the more I love Seismitoad. Now here's a card I kind of missed off first time round. Beartick. The second attack is garbage, ignore it, but the first attack, Igloo Hold. Double colourless, making it very splashable. 20 damage plus 20 more damage for each colourless in your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost, which ironically means it does 100 to itself in a mirror match. But this is fantastic. Now, you take it out against something like Virizion Genesect, it will do 20 damage to Virizion, it will do 40 damage to Genesect. It ain't lasting 2 minutes. It's also got a weakness to metal, which is good right now. But what it does do is it does 120 to Pyroar. Yes, Pyroar has a retreat cost of 2, meaning it does 60, with the weakness 120. It does 160 to Landorus, retreat cost of 3, does 80, times 2 for the water weakness is 160, stick a Muscle Band on, 200, one hit KOing a Landorus. This is good, ladies and gentlemen. You can be doing a fair amount of damage, and it's got 130 HP on a stage 1. If you're going against anything with a large retreat cost, it takes a little bit to take this bad boy down, and you're doing a fair amount of damage for just a DCE, and let's not forget Laser Verbank can be added to this. as well as your muscle band, or even, to be honest, your you could add Silver Bangle to go against EXs, although that card is generally worse, because you can't use it against non-EXs. The point is, Beartic, good splashable card. I didn't make a big deal about it the first time round, probably should have. One card that I gave too much time to first time round is Aurorus. We know that there is that supporter card, Fossil Researcher, that allows you to search for 2 of these basics and put it on your bench. The attack's kind of rubbish. It does reduce damage done by 20 if you've got water energy on a water Pokémon. If you've got 4 out, it reduces 80 damage, but the setup is big, Garbodor is everywhere, and the attack is garbage. Sorry, Aurorus, I don't like you very much. It's nothing personal, you've just got a really bad attack. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're still a good person. Moving on to Electric, we have Electivire, which matches up with the Magmortar we just talked about. Magmortar's your main attack. Your main attacker. Electivire only needs 1 lightning energy, so you could use his attacks. What I do quite like, Tag Team Spark, 20 plus 20 more damage for each energy attached to your Magmortar. So you can pile energy on Magmortar and then attack with Electivire for just a lightning energy, but honestly, it's going to take a long time and it's not going to last all that long. Plus Aluminum, I mean, as always, I don't know. I mean, the Plusle's kind of interesting. For 1 energy, discard a basic energy from your hand and draw 2 cards. Maybe in Extended you could use that with Eels, but it doesn't look particularly great. Now, Deden. Deden is an interesting Pokemon. Well, it's kind of like a smaller, fatter, uglier Pikachu. Sorry for Deden fans out there. But more importantly, it's got 2 interesting attacks. Entrainment, whatever that means, for 1 energy, allows you to just get 2 basic Pokemon and put them on your bench. As I said first time round, not great now, but maybe it will be one day. Energy Short does 20 times the amount of damage attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. I just don't like it. People pointing out first time it's good against Yveltal, meh. I mean, Yveltal, as I've said on the podcast before, most of the time your play is Y-Cyclone. You get a Dark and a DCE on Yveltal, you use Y-Cyclone to do 19, move the DCE to a bench Pokemon, maybe Mewtwo, maybe Yveltal, another Yveltal, and then you've got 1 energy on, so Deden comes up and does 40 damage with weakness, 80 damage with a muscle band, 110 damage with a laser Verbank, and it's asking quite a bit. And then he gets KO'd really easily by Yveltal. I just don't really like it. It's another one of those cards, like we kind of talked about with Mega Gengar EX a little while ago, where it's too much in your opponent's hand what to do. And I don't like... Now, I don't like cards where your opponent kind of controls it. Now, I know that kind of goes against me playing Zoroark at the ECC. Honestly, it was an amazing Black Kyurem EX counter, and essentially playing Leafeon with the Energy Crush or whatever it was called basically meant my opponent had 2 choices. Pile energy on a Caldeo, Leafeon 1 hits, attack with Black Kyurem EX, Zoroark 1 hits. In that particular format, with Blastoise being as big as it was, that basically gave me a really, really strong Blastoise matchup. That's about the only time to play it. Otherwise, you're leaving it in your opponent's hand. Same thing with Deden. If Yveltal got really, really big, maybe you could put 1, but honestly, I don't see it as a card people are going to play. Now, Hypno is a stage 1 no one's going to play, moving into Psychic. Essentially, you look at your opponent's hand, choose a supporter, and use it making all the decisions. So you can make your opponent end himself down to 1. You can maybe find a Cassius and make your opponent pick up their active with all the energy attached. You can find a Lysandra and use it so they don't get to use the supporter, it gets discarded, but use it as a free switch for yourself, or make your opponent Juniper or Sycamore away a really good hand, or something like that. I've seen a few ruling questions about this card recently, and there's no... Literally, look at your opponent's hand, choose a supporter. If there's 1 there, you must choose 1. You only get away with it if there's none there, although you've wasted your attack, and use it. If the only card in your opponent's hand, the only supporter, is a Getsis, then you use the Getsis. You shuffle your trainer cards back into your deck. Your opponent draws as many cards as you shuffled back in. It's a risk-reward card, just like Undaunted Smeargle back a couple of formats ago. It's not particularly complicated. It does exactly what it says on the tin. The rest of Psychic is a fairly miserable bunch. There's the Jinx, which heals 10 damage from your active. It's not enough. It doesn't add up quickly enough. And there's a Gothitelle, which allows you to discard a stadium and search for a stadium and put it in play. I can see one or two people running this as a counter card. As a tech card to run counter stadiums. But it just comes down to the fact that it's too much investment. Running a stage 2 just to get your stadiums, you'd might as well run a couple of Skylers. Moving into fighting, and this is, of course, the kind of trade, this is kind of like the selling point of the set. We start with Machamp, the ability where all of your fighting Pokemon do 20 more damage. I did play against one of these decks online, and you'll see that with my Seismitoad deck coming up in the next few days. Two things I want to say about this, and then we're going to move on, quite frankly. Firstly, it's, like I've just said for Gothitelle, it's a fair amount of investment. Secondly, Corinna makes it playable. Now, you would have to run a very simple deck, something like Lucario Machamp or Lucario Landorus Machamp. I don't know that you'd find room for Mewtwo's and DCEs, etc. And you'd run a Machamp line, probably 4-0-4 or something like that. But you use Corinna, and then you search for Rare Candy Machamp, get it up. Now, it's got a retreat cost of 2, which makes it a bit of a pain in the neck. It needs free energy to attack, making it a bit of a pain in the neck. But let's say, for argument's sake, you get 4 Machamp on the bench. A big ass, but if you run a deck like this, it'll happen eventually. That's an extra 80 damage. Let's take Lucario EX. 30 damage. Add the 80 from Machamp is 110. Add 20 from Muscle Band, it's 130. Add 20 from the Stadium, it's 150. Add a Strong Energy, it's 170. Take the Fighting Stadium out, replace it with Verbank Laser, it's 180. You are one-hitting anything that isn't a Mega EX for a single energy. That attack goes through resistance, and by using Muscle Band, Verbank Laser, it doesn't matter whether they are EXs or not. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a lot of investment, but if you could ever get it working, it would be amazing. I would like it. There's a few rubbishy Pokemon. I mean, Hariyama's, I love his ability. Reducing damage done by 30, but only from Fire or Water Pokemon is amazing. Interestingly, Seismitoad would do no damage, but it's got a rubbish attack for free energy. What do you want? Lucario EX, as I've said, I love Lucario EX. It is countered by Mewtwo, but what I would say is Mewtwo with 2 energy, you with 1 energy. Say the Mewtwo puts a Muscle Band on, that's not quite a KO. That would be doing 160, and if they put 3 energy on their Mewtwo, you can respond with your own Mewtwo. I quite like it. But here's what I love about Lucario, the 2 energy attack. Landorus doesn't have a 2 energy attack, Lucario does. 60 damage, and then you can add Fighting Stadium, Laser, Verbank, Muscle Band, whatever you want. 60 damage, draw 2, you got 6 in your hand. Anyone who spent any time playing with or against fighting decks will have realised at this point you're rarely doing the advertised damage. You're not often going to have all of the extra bits in play, but you're rarely doing the advertised damage. That's not going to be 60, it's going to be 100. For 2 energy, draw 2, you got 6 in your hand. Everyone is fawning over Landorus at the moment. I think Lucario is a better card, quite frankly. There, I said it. Fact of the matter is, Lucario is an amazing card. 60 for 2 energy is just brilliant. 100 for 3 energy is pretty good. You're likely to be one-hitting EXs by the time you get that attack going. Mega Lucario I don't like purely because with all the extra stuff that fighting have got, you might as well just be trying to use Lucario EX's free energy attack for 100 plus extras. But what is kind of funky with that is that you could be, for instance, I don't know, it's a half-decent Pyroar counter, but so's Garbodor. Now, one card which I am liking a little bit more is Mian Xiao. Aero Turn, 40 damage, 1 energy, return this Pokemon and all cards attached to it to your hand. And essentially what you would need to do is get a few Iron Fu on the bench, attack with Iron Chow, return it to your hand, preferably with a strong energy muscle band. Next turn, strong energy muscle band, Iron Chow, 80 damage. And you'd probably stick up a Trevenant in between. I think it's a lot of investment. People are playing this with Donphan. Not to keep going on about it, but I've got a game with Seismitoad against Seismitoad Trevenant. Seismitoad against Donphan Trevenant, and I reckon that will probably be going up around about Sunday-ish, maybe beginning of next week. Iron Chow's kind of like that, but with a lower retreat cost, and it goes back to your hand, so it can be end away. I don't know, I'd play Donphan just because I love Donphan. Mini Landorus, non-EX Landorus, I still love this. Second attack is garbage, but 20 plus attaching an energy from the discard to one of your bench Pokemon. It's nice for two reasons. Firstly, it's good in the mid-game if you're struggling. Secondly, it creates a 7-prize game, and if you're just using Mewtwo, Landorus EX, Lucario EX, it's good to have a 7th prize in there. Now, it only takes one attack, as does Landorus and Lucario, so maybe you're never going to want to use it. If I was running a fighting deck, you need a non-EX, I'd stick it in there. If you want to run a non-EX, how about Horliture? For one fighting energy, 60 to an EX, nothing to a non-EX. Now, it does say damage isn't affected by weakness or resistance, but fighting decks at the moment seem to be running better with Garbodor. Get a Garbodor up, block your own ability, and then you can do 60 for 1 energy, and weakness goes through. So you stick a Silver Bangle on there, and it one hits a Thundurus. It's still not great, and it's only got 60 HP and a weakness to Lightning. 70 HP and a weakness to Lightning, but it's still pretty good. Horliture EX, it's garbage. It's got 130 HP, it does 100 damage for free energy, and even then it's only when you got a Stadium in play. And an ability which is basically Rocky Helmet. I wish it was Rock Guard. I don't like it. It's kind of garbage. Dark Pokemon. I'm going to be honest, ladies and gentlemen. I don't like any of the Dark Pokemon. I don't really like any of the Fairy Pokemon. Now, Sylveon's got an interesting attack for a Fairy Energy. Although, truth be told, I only really want to mention this because of a funny little kind of ruling or rules issue. Some of you may not have realised. Curly Ribbon. It moves an energy. Strong energy can only be attached to a fighting, and herbal energy can only be attached to a grass. So if you move their energy using Curly Ribbon to a non-fighting Pokemon, or their herbal energy to a non-grass Pokemon, it actually gets discarded. Now, it's still only 30 damage on a 90 HP Pokemon with a 50 HP base that's weak to fighting, blah blah blah, but it's a fun little trick. And one of the stupidest Pokemon around is Klefki. It raises your resistance to -40. Dark isn't really relevant anymore unless Evil Tao comes back. So, gutted. Moving into Dragon, there are 4 Dragon cards in this set. And as far as I'm concerned, 3 of them are really interesting cards. I don't think they're good for the record, but I think they're interesting. Start off with Dragonite EX. The ability Burst In. Now, I remember this ability from Machamp Prime. I believe it was on another even older card. And essentially, you put it down, you put it active, you move any basic energy from other Pokemon onto it. Lovely. You only put it active if you put basic energy onto it. It's only basic, not any energy that goes against it. But also it takes lightning energy. 80 damage for 2 grass and a lightning, 120 if you discard an energy, 140 with a muscle band, 170 with muscle band laser Verbank. But I don't like it, because what are you going to play it with? I mean, this goes back to what I said, I don't know, 15-20 minutes ago, about, the EX with the horn, what's he called? Heracross. If you're running a grass deck, you're running Virizion Genesect. Now, you would basically have to fit Dragonite into a Virizion Genesect deck. 2 reasons why you shouldn't. First of all, Red Signal's an amazing ability. Anyone who's been playing this game for any length of time knows how good a Pokemon Catcher, or Lysandra, not Lysander, style effect will know how good Red Signal is. Busting is cool because you can also then max potion or super scoop up that Dragonite. Whatever you've just replaced. So say you switch one Dragonite for another, max potion, super scoop up, hit ahead, scoop up Cyclone even, and all of a sudden you've stopped your opponent knocking it out. But I'd still rather have Red Signal. Not only that, you put G-Booster on Genesect, you do 200 damage. If you don't, you do 100 damage for free energy. Dragonite, you do 80 or 120. It's not so good. So better attacks, better ability, just use Genesect EX. Dragonite is cool. I am not arguing about that. Dragonite is one of the coolest Pokemon, always has been, always will be. But I don't like the card so much. The other reason is Lightning Energy, and this is something I'm going to talk about in upcoming podcasts, because I believe Rizzy and Genesect will remain relevant. Here's the deal. Rizzy and Genesect needs Grass Energy. But nowadays, you could put Beartic in as a good Pyro counter. You could put Mewtwo in for... Well, firstly, Mewtwo Wars are coming back. Secondly, for a Lucario counter. Now, I don't know if you necessarily need counters for them, because Genesect is pretty good against the fighting decks. But you can put it in there anyway. So you might want to run DCE for them. Also, DCE, remember, you attach a DCE to Genesect, and you can discard that DCE, and then you don't have to discard any other energy. It's 2 energy. So I can have free energy on a Genesect. I can then attach DCE, discard it for the G-Booster, and keep free energy on my Genesect. If I'm playing against Mewtwo, I'm not going to want to, but let's ignore that. So I want Grass Energy, and I may want DCE. And I'm going to want some Plasma. Firstly, for Genesect's Red Signal ability. Secondly, for Colress Machine, to act as some further energy acceleration. So I want Plasma Energy, and I want DCE. And I'm probably going to want some Herbal Energy, because it gets 30 damage off, and, as corrected on a previous podcast, it activates Virizian's ability. And this is going to be the big issue of Virizian going forward. I cannot play 4 DCE, 4 Plasma, 4 Herbal Energy. That's 12 energy. I need some basic energy for Emerald Slash. So cuts are going to have to be made. Where are you getting the Lightning Energy from for Dragonite? Okay, so you don't run Plasma Energy. Well, first of all, you don't run DCE. Fair enough. Takes Mewtwo and Beartic off the table, but alright, you're running a Dragonite deck. Fair enough. Well, then you take the Plasma Energy out, because you don't want to run Genesect. Well, fair enough, but there goes Red Signal, and there goes G-Booster. And then you might get a couple of Herbal Energy in. But the fact of the matter is, that instead of having a deck where you might have Beartic, you might have Mewtwo, you've definitely got Genesect, you're running with just Dragonite. So as much as I like Dragonite's ability, and let's not forget, Garbodor's going to be everywhere, that cuts off Dragonite's ability if you can't find a startling Megaphone. Ignoring all of this, the fact of the matter is that it's just not as good as a standard Virizian Genesect deck. Sorry. Now, Flygon's got a very interesting attack. Rainbow Shower for 1 colourless energy. Attach as many basic energy as you like in any way that you like. Problem is, you've got to get a stage 2 up and use the attack in order to do that, and then you've got to have the basic energy in your hand. Now, I played with a Terrakion EX deck a little bit last format, and I know some of you will have as well, and that allowed you to attach 2 basic energy. And remember how many times you didn't have the 2 basic? Now, admittedly, we've got Professor's Letter now, but really, is it going to work? Noivern is another close but no cigar Pokemon. The attack is not good. It does 30 to each opponent's Pokemon for free energy. Kind of like Glaciate, no one really uses Glaciate. That's on the Outrage Kyurem that was reprinted in Legendary Treasures, originally I believe from Noble Victories. And the other thing is, it's dark and psychic and colourless. Ouch. Now, it's got an interesting ability. If any damage is done by attacks, flip a coin if heads prevent that damage. 50-50 chance. It's got 100 HP. It's not going to last very long. Maybe 2 hits. It's not going to take long for that Pokemon to go down. Sorry about that. And finally, now, if we look at the colourless Pokemon, I mean, Watchdog's got another funky little attack, where for 1 energy you can choose an item card and shuffle it back into their deck. But really, the only one here is Eevee. Now, I believe the ruling is going to state that, I believe it does state, that you can evolve turn 1. Let me know if that's not the case. Essentially, you attach a basic energy and evolve Eevee. You attach a grass energy, you can go for Leafeon. You attach a water energy, you can go for Glaceon or Vaporeon, etc. So that's kind of interesting. That's about it. So let's move into the trainers. Energy switch. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Battle Reporter, draw cards until you have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent. It's good, it's situational, it revolves around what your opponent does. It's not going to be good all the time. We've got better supporters, leave it. Corinna, amazing in fighting deck. Search for a Pokemon, search for an item card, and that could be a computer search to get a strong energy. It could be a switch to get the right Pokemon active. It could even be something like a rare candy matchup. Maintenance, shuffle 2 cards in and draw a card. Now, if you're going full-on trainer draw, you could use this, because not only would it allow you to draw a card, but it would also empty your hand so you could use Bicycle. You're effectively trading 2 cards for 1. That brings your hand size down by 1, meaning you'll draw 1 extra card with Bicycle. You can even run this for something like Battle Reporter or Bianca if it's not been rotated out. I can't remember offhand if it has. I'll correct that in a second. But the point is, it could be useful. The other thing I like about this is, of course, that you can kind of get good cards back into your deck so you don't end up junipering them. It's kind of interesting, I suppose, but it's really not amazing. Sorry. So, that is maintenance. It's not amazing, but it could see some use. Mountain Ring stops damage to bench Pokemon. I can see this seeing play. For the time being, while we've got Mime, I think Mime is probably a little bit better. Because also, remember, your opponent can play counter stadiums, and that means that they then do bench damage. But, you know, Bianca, as a side note, was in Boundaries Crossed as a secret rare, and it was in Legendary Treasures of reprints. It's going to be around for a while. My apologies, that slipped my mind for a second. But Mountain Ring really just... Your opponent can play down a stadium and then do bench damage, and that's what I don't like about it. Plus, you probably want to play other stadiums instead. Focus Sash... Excuse me. Fighting Stadium. Energy Switch has been around for a while. It's nice to have it in the format. Fighting Stadium, 20 more damage to an EX. I like it, but honestly, if I'm playing a fighting deck, I'm going to be playing Laser Verbank. Laser Verbank will do 30 damage to anything. Fighting Stadium will do 20 damage to an EX. Now, don't get me wrong, you've only got 4 lasers, and you can't play them under Trainer Lock, etc., etc. So, of course, in some circumstances, Fighting Stadium will be better, but I still prefer Verbank Laser. Focus Sash, I haven't seen anyone playing this yet, online or in real life, and that surprises me. Essentially, if your fighting Pokemon would be knocked out, its HP goes to 10 instead. Now, yeah, your opponent can KO you with a laser. Yeah, your opponent can play a Megaphone to get rid of this and then KO you, if they've got a laser or if they've got a Megaphone. If they don't, they're not going to KO you. Why is no one playing this? Genuinely. Again, this would be another good card for Tool Scrapper, because Tool Scrapper would then be able to get rid of, say, a Muscle Band right before you died and put on a Focus Sash. But what can you do? Fossil Researcher, search for 2 fossil Pokemon, Amura or Tyrunt, and put them onto your bench. This slows your deck down because you're not using draw supporters, and neither of them are actually good enough, so gutted. Full Heal, we've had for a while, nobody ever plays it. Remove status conditions. If you really want to use that, there's a better card in this set. And I appear to have gone out of order for a little while, so let's try and go back in order now. With Sparkling Robe. Now, I like Sparkling Robe. Essentially, it removes special conditions and means you can't be affected by special conditions. I like it because it's really nice for playing against decks which rely on laser, etc. The biggest downside is, of course, you can't play Muscle Band, but what can you do? Super Scoop Up, amazing if you hit heads, rubbish if you hit tails. It allows you to pick up one of your Pokemon and all cards attached to it. People will play this, and over the next format, you'll probably lose a game to people playing Super Scoop Up. I like Super Scoop Up. Tool Retriever. Put 2 Pokemon Tool cards attached to your Pokemon and put them into your hand. I suppose I should have talked about this card a little bit more, really. It's still not as good as Tool Scrapper, because Tool Scrapper you could get rid of theirs or yours, whichever was more beneficial. Tool Retriever, as I've said, you could pick up a Muscle Band and put a Focus Sash down. You could take your Spirit Link off of your active Pokemon and then put a Muscle Band down. Now this obviously makes a lot more sense than Masquerain, takes up a lot less space, harder to draw into because you can't really search for it, unless you're playing Elsa, maybe? The one from Radiant Collection in Legendary Treasures that allowed you to search for Pokemon Tool cards. But whereas if you're playing Masquerain, you'll have Pokemon Search in your deck. The point is, Tool Retriever's really good if you're running a variety of tools. Take your Muscle Band off your Genesect and put on a G-Booster. Take your Muscle Band off of your Landorus and put on a Focus Sash, etc. A lot of people are playing cards like Kyurem and Seismitoad that can one-hit Landorus. Or they're playing cards like Mewtwo that can one-hit Lucario. Focus Sash swings it back into your favour. And the last trainer in the set is a Stadium Training Centre. Each Stage 1 and Stage 2 gets 30 more HP. I'm not a fan of cards like this. Aspertia City Gym in Next Destinies did the same thing for colourless Pokemon, except I believe it was 20 HP. The thing about this is, it allows your opponent to take mid-turn KOs, and there is nothing worse than your opponent taking mid-turn KOs. You've got 10 HP left and you've got this Stadium in play. Your opponent plays down a counter Stadium, gets rid of your Stadium, and then goes ahead and takes a prize mid-turn, and then goes ahead and has an attack after that. It's too unreliable, because even if it keeps you alive, your opponent can then just play down a counter Stadium, get rid of your Stadium, and then you die as well, so you're not actually getting anywhere. It's not a card that I am a particularly huge fan of. Some people might want to run it. Last 2 cards in the set, 'cause this is turning into a fairly mammoth podcast, although, let's face it, it ain't the first time. So last couple of cards in the set. First things first, we have got Strong Energy, and I've talked about this quite a lot. I don't really know what more there is to say. It's fantastic, it's amazing. We don't have, at the moment, Enhanced Hammer in the format, although as I've mentioned before, it was released as a promo recently in Japan, so don't be surprised if it makes a comeback in Phantom Forces. So it's just really, really good. It adds 20 damage. It's amazing. But the fact of the matter is that when Enhanced Hammer comes back, it's going to be weaker, and you can only run 4 of it. And it's going to be horrible against things like Edge Slash EX, because it means you can't attack it. Until then, if you're playing a fighting deck, put 4 of them in. Herbal Energy is weirder, though. I would argue just as good. Cure 30 HP from your active Pokemon, the Pokemon to which you attach it. Boom, Bonza, lovely, wonderful, get in, my son. And it activates Virizian's ability, but it's 1 less energy you can Emerald Slash. And as you will have seen if you watch the stream from Worlds, and there was a lot of Virizian Genesect on the stream at Worlds, you run out of grass energy quite quickly. And that's a problem. So, something to bear in mind. Also, you can't run Super Rod anymore, but you can still run things like Energy Retrieval to get that grass energy back. But not Herbal Energy. And especially we're wanting to run Plasma Energy for Genesect and maybe wanting to run double Colourless Energy as well, then quite frankly, it's going to get quite difficult quite quickly to it's going to get quite difficult to actually balance this energy. And as we're coming up to an hour, I am just going to wrap this up nice and quickly and leave you find people about your day. So, Furious Fists, it's a good set. There are some really good trainers, things like Corinna, Fighting Stadium, Focus Sash, which we're going to be seeing for a long time to come. Herbal Energy, Strong Energy, again, these are cards which are going to keep coming around. In terms of Pokemon, the pickings are actually a little bit slimmer. In terms of Pokemon that you're going to see day in, day out, Seismitoad is going to see some play, Doden might, Lucario EX will, Hawlucha will, and Dragonite will probably see a little bit of play. The Eevee might as well. That's pretty much it, but there's plenty of cards in there which are going to see some play here and there. I like Sylveon in a little energy denial deck. I like Noivern in a fancy little kind of rogue deck of its own. I like things like Dragonite EX and Machamp and stuff like that. Someone's going to make the obvious Politoed Poliwrath deck, and I don't think it's going to be great, but I think it's going to be worth a punt. So, that is the set. As always, tweet me at the Wassy, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk with any questions, queries, quibbles, concerns, etc. that you have. And if you're listening on YouTube, etc., of course, just drop us a line in the comments. And if you are listening on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will be back next week with an interview, hopefully, from our world champion, and a look at some more decks and how they've been affected by the rotation and the introduction of Furious Fists. Until then, thank you very much for listening. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.